Hey, this is Cam Dye, professional triathlete, father, husband, and three-time winner of the Lifetime Triathlon Series. And you are listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by the Gold Coast Marathon and Pogo Physio. I trust you've been having a great week, and I hope that you've been enjoying pursuing your physical best. On today's episode, I share a conversation with you that I had with top-ranked US triathlete Cameron Dye. Cam Dye is well known in the US and abroad in the world triathlon scene as a specialist non-drafting triathlete across the Olympic distance, comprising 1,500 metre swim, 40k on the bike, and 10 kilometres of running to finish it off. Cam's resume is impressive. It boasts many podiums in some of the biggest events in the world triathlon scene, including just a few days prior to this episode going live, Cam picking up second place in the coveted Escape from Alcatraz triathlon in San Francisco. In fact, during today's conversation, Cam references how he would like to have taken the title in the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon. However, he came in just a whisker short of previous podcast guest Ben Kanute, also a fellow US triathlete. So well done, Cam, on a gallant second place. Cam takes us through the highs, the lows, and the many learnings of his career to date. There's some great stories thrown in the mix. You're going to really enjoy Cam Dye. He's one of the only born and bred athletes that call Boulder, Colorado home. Let's jump in with Mr. Cam Dye. This is a real treat, catching up with Cam Dye, who I believe is the only born and raised Boulder, Colorado triathlete on the scene. So Cam Dye, great to have you online.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Brad. How you doing?
Great, Cam. It's been a little while since we eyeballed each other over on Hamilton Island for the Super League Triathlon Series launch. So a lot to catch up on. But to start with, Cam, what's one thing that Cam Dye is learning at the moment?
I think as a professional triathlete, obviously there's the physical side of things, but I think the thing I'm constantly learning, so you could probably ask me this any day of the week, would be how to best juggle being a good dad and a good husband and a professional athlete, because they don't always sync up with the time commitments. And as my kids get older and we get into more sports and things that I need to be at on a certain time, it's making me really work on my time management. So it's a constant learning process.
And have you applied any of your learnings in recent times to success, Cam, or otherwise?
I think the best I've done recently was I actually had a long ride on a Saturday that I split into two pieces with a quick stop at the soccer pitch to watch my son play his game in the middle of it. So I went out, did some intervals, stopped for the game, went back out, and finished up the ride. So we got the session in, and I still got to see the game.
Look at that. That's multitasking. Cam, your children are Liam 6 years and Lucia 4 years at the time of recording. You mentioned sports. So soccer is one of the sports. What are the other sports the kids are into?
Yeah, my son, he's also playing coach pitch baseball for the first time this year. They did T-ball last year. Now we've moved up a notch to coach pitch, and he played basketball this winter for the first time. So he's pretty well-rounded. Lucia's she's not quite as into the sports just yet. She likes watching, but we haven't quite found anything that she really wants to take a try at. So we will hopefully get her involved in something here in the near future, but waiting to see what she's interested in.
Well, gosh, growing up in Boulder, Colorado, she'll have many influences. That's for sure.
There are plenty of choices.
That's right, Cam. In terms of your youth, your athletic development, talking about sport at a young age, what did sport look like for a young Cam Dye? I believe you were quite the superfish at a young age.
Yeah, I did all right in the water. I started out playing, traditional American stuff. I was playing soccer when I was 8, picked up baseball at 6 or 7, started swimming when I was 8 as well. I guess kind of a funny story to get into that. Neither of my parents swim at all. I mean, I think both of them, if they fall out of the boat, could probably make it back, but that might be up for debate as well. So for me, swimming was something totally foreign to them. And I actually got into it because one of my cousins was a swimmer, and he had this corkboard on his wall in his room, and it was covered in ribbons and medals. And I remember going to his house one time and looking at it and being like, that's awesome. He wins all these races and he gets all these medals and ribbons. And then I turned around and told my parents I wanted to be a swimmer, which, I mean, I guess is an interesting way to get into it because clearly you have to be good to win the ribbons and medals. But nonetheless, that's how we got into it. It was simply a goal to win some ribbons and medals, and got into it, loved it, took to it right away. And I ended up quitting soccer at about 10, played baseball until I was 12, and then was pretty much a swimmer. Swam all the way through college. I ran cross country for 3 years in high school. But yeah, in the end, I wanted to be a swimmer, and the goal was to always go swim in college. And so that was the goal. And I ended up swimming at the University of Iowa here in the States, and yeah, loved every minute of it.
And I believe, you enjoyed the IM individual medley stuff because it wasn't as monotonous as just focusing on a single stroke.
Yeah, no, it was my events in high school were the 2 free, the 4 IM, and the 500. Did a little bit more freestyle in college, but yeah, I always liked the 4 IM. I mean, it was just the toughest event. And you had to do a little bit of everything, and you had to be good at it all. And yeah, that was one of my favorites for sure.
And at this stage, Cam, how were you competing? Were you successful? Were you winning medals at this point, or were you just a good, promising junior in the pool?
Yeah, no, I you could probably argue that based on my nationally ranked times, I was the best I ever was when I was 12, because that was the only time I was ever in the top 16 times in the USA was when I was 12. Had a state record here in Colorado in the 100 backstroke. So I was good when I was little. I would say, if anything, that was back before all the other guys around me got bigger and stronger, and I didn't grow quite as fast, so I fell behind a bit. Ended up being a national level swimmer. Swam at a D1 school. Never went to NCs. Was a senior national qualifier for nationals, but never quite made trials cuts. So I was good, but definitely not great. And that was sort of how I got into triathlon, I guess, in some ways, was that, when I was 15, I did my first race, and I won the 15 to 19 age group as a 15-year-old in my first race. Really enjoyed it. But I think at that point I could also kind of see the writing on the wall that the Olympic dream that had always been there for me wasn't really a possibility anymore in swimming. And it was right about the time that the 2000 Olympics were coming up, and seeing that and kind of thinking, well, maybe that was another way to get to the Olympics was triathlon. That was definitely a factor into getting into the sport.
And Cam, at that point, you're 15 years of age. Had any triathletes appeared on your radar that you obviously growing up around a real training hotspot in Boulder, Colorado, were there any athletes that you were admiring or inspired by at this young age?
Sure, yeah. I had the fortune of meeting Maddie Reed when I was real young, right about that time, 15, 16, and doing a couple swim sessions with him, a couple open water sessions, and he was super helpful, real easy dude to talk to. He was willing to answer any questions I had. And I was also fortunate enough to know Nicole DeBoom, the wife of Tim DeBoom, through swimming. She was actually a club coach back then, so I would see her at swim meets and made the connection there as well. But just growing up in Boulder, you would see people constantly. I didn't know most of them, and my parents not really being involved in the endurance world, that wasn't the key. But I had some great coaches growing up in swimming that actually introduced me to some people, and I think it was sort of watching the Boulder Peak and then doing the Boulder Peak myself when I was 15, seeing Tim the Boom win Kona twice. It was just sort of like, Boulder was a good place to be, to sort of just catch the bug, I guess, by proximity as much as anything else.
And if uninitiated, Cam, a lot of people have heard of Boulder, Colorado. I, for one, haven't been there. I feel like I may have been through looking at scenery on social media, etc., and an endurance athlete's post. But how would you describe the community of Boulder, Colorado?
It's changed a lot over the time I've lived here. But in general, it's just a super, super fit place. I mean, everybody here works out one way or another, whether they ski or ride bikes or, play tennis, do the more traditional sports. I think it's been Outside Magazine used to do a fittest city in America article every year, and Boulder was always at the top. So, I think it's just a community that really it values fitness and the outdoors and a healthy lifestyle. It's a good place to be if you want to get outside and you want to get into sports. There are a few places like it. We have access to the mountains, so we can do the winter sports all winter. It's nice and warm here in the summer, so we can do all the summer sports. And then the winters aren't so bad that you've got to escape elsewhere. I train here every winter. I don't ever go anywhere. You just put on some warm clothes and get the work done. So it's a great place to be year round. People are friendly. It's gotten bigger for sure over the years, but I think on the whole, it's still basically the same place I grew up in.
Yeah, brilliant. Cam, what would you say through those formative triathlon years? You got the bug at 15 with an early success there. What were the next sort of 10 years of your triathlon career like? You eventually got over to the ITU, spent some time there on the World Triathlon Series side of things. So what were some of the highlights along that sort of next 10 years of your, really the first 10 years of your triathlon career? Sure.
I guess the first, 7 years of that was really pretty empty. After that first race I did when I was 15, I didn't do another triathlon until I graduated college. So there was 7 years there where it was all about swimming and getting a college scholarship, going to college, and then competing in college. And then when I finished up college swimming in the spring of my senior year, I basically talked to the swim coaches and said, "Hey, I want to go be a triathlete. Can I keep training with the team?" So when all the other seniors were off drinking 5 nights a week, enjoying their senior year, I was still getting up for 5 a.m. practice and trying to stay in shape as I tried to head down the road of being a professional triathlete. So I moved back to Boulder after college. Spent that first year getting my pro license. Traveled to a few races here in the States, the very starving artist athlete story. Lots of roommates, lots of ramen noodles, lots of Cliff Bars, working 3 different jobs, trying to pay my way to get to races. And then, like you said, I started the original dream and the original goal was the Olympics. So that all revolves around the ITU. So right away I was trying to jump into Continental Cups and going to U.S. Nationals every year. And then I was fortunate enough to get a start at I went to the ITU Continental Cup in Mazatlan. I believe it was 2009. And I basically swam at the front, broke away on the bike, got a lead, and then was able to hold on for second and basically turned a draft legal race into a non-drafting race. And the USAT people took notice of that, and then I was able to get a start at the World Cup in Tizi that year in Tiszaváros, Hungary, where I had some more success swimming well, swam on Richard Varga's feet back before Richard Varga was the guy we know and love now. Probably the only time I've ever swum on his feet. But came out of the water with him, took some turns at the front, tried to break away over and over again. Never quite succeeded, but again, sort of caught the eye of the U.S. Federation, and based on that result, was then selected to go to Worlds that year on the Gold Coast over near you, and be a domestique for the U.S. team. Jared Shoemaker then was, I think, third in the world going into the race. So basically, they took me over there as the guy that was supposed to make sure he got to the front, which I did. I did my part. I swam well. I rode well. The race didn't quite break up like we'd hoped, and I think he ended up somewhere in the top 10. But it was, sort of along the way, I started to realize that my strengths of swimming and biking were definitely not as useful in the ITU. This was mostly before the Brownlees and then right at the beginning of their career, back when most of the races were just wet runs, basically. Everybody swam fast, everybody rode slow, and then everybody ran fast.
Yep.
So for a guy like me, it didn't play to my strengths at all. And at the time, with the Lifetime Series here in the States, I started to realize that if I could go swim and ride really hard, I could at least get into the money and, figure out if I could just run a little bit faster, ride a little bit harder, that was probably how I was going to make my name in the sport. So it was about 2010, I guess, I started more focusing on the non-drafting side of things, really focusing on the Lifetime Series every year, trying to make that the goal. I guess as far as the ITU goes, the highlight of my career for sure was when 2013 came around and the mixed team relay came about. And then they were talking about, okay, maybe that'll be in the Olympics in 2016. And I was selected for the U.S. team to go over to Hamburg and do the world team title there. I was with Ben Kanute, Sarah Groff, and Glenn Jorgensen. And we had a great race. It was the first time the U.S. had ever been really in the mix. We ended up getting the bronze medal, which was awesome. It still hangs in my office. It's definitely one of the high points of my triathlon career. But yeah, that was definitely, I think, the highlight of my ITU career was being selected for and then actually coming through with a medal at that ITU Team Worlds.
World champs, and what a team you were surrounded by there. A couple of the previous guests, Gwen and also Ben. Fantastic. Cam, and if you had to, aside from the World Championship team mixed team relay medal, pick your most significant racing achievement, what would it be and why?
It's funny. Two things always come to mind, so I'll give you two. St. Anthony's here in the States has always sort of been the Paris-Roubaix of triathlon, if you will, where it's the first big race in the spring in the States, in North America. All the best in the world have done it. It's sort of a non-drafting classic. This year was the 35th anniversary of the race, so it's a race that has a ton of history. And in 2010, that I went down there, and it was, I think, the third time I'd done the race. And it was one of those things where just in sports, sometimes you show up to a race, you feel really good. Sometimes you feel bad. And this was one of those times where I showed up and I was kind of looking around at the field. And for whatever reason, I started to convince myself that I actually could win the race. And, it was one of those things that looking back on now, probably had no business doing, with the likes of Crowe and Greg Bennett and Matt Reed and Andy Potts. And the who's who of the sport were there. But it was one of those days where I had a killer swim, got out of the water first, hit the bike and did my thing. And I think Crowe and Greg just sort of underestimated what I could do on the bike. And they thought that, I'd blown up a million times on the run. So, of course, I was going to blow up again. They'd catch me later and it'd be no big deal. And at St. Anthony's, it's a straight out and back run. So the only time you see the chasers you get to see the leaders at the halfway point. And I remember turning at the halfway point and still had like 90 seconds. And then it just, you just kind of start thinking, wow, like you could actually do this. And so that year, St. Anthony's was my first ever major win. Like I said, the podium was me and Greg Bennett and Craig Alexander, like the who's who of the sport. And I think that was the moment when I actually realized that this dream I'd had since I was 15 of becoming a professional triathlete actually could become a reality. I actually could make a go as a professional athlete. Because I think triathlon's sort of funny in the sense that to be a professional, you simply have to go attain a license, right? You just go do well at an amateur race, and then you can go race pro, and you can call yourself a professional triathlete. But in every other sport, the only people that can call themselves professionals are the people that truly make a living and pay all their bills and support their family and stuff based on the sport. And I think that was the first time when I realized that, that could actually happen. And that was a really cool feeling. And because of that, that race has always been super special to me. And if I can give you another one, the other one was in 2012. I won the Lifetime Series for the first time. So it was a 6-race series, a lot of history, a lot of money. I'd been in the series for a couple of years. I was on the podium the year before, and I came out of the year strong, won an early season race, then went to LA, and I think it was the first week of September or so, and I won LA. So I actually bookended a season. I'd won races at 2 ends of the season, which I'd never done before. Was in the lead with one more race, the finale in Dallas the next week. But the catch was my wife was, at that point, she was about 37 weeks pregnant. So I flew home from LA, landed fairly late. I think I got home at probably 10 or 11 at night. We went to bed, and then 3 hours or so later, she woke me up kind of in a panic because she was feeling terrible. Things just weren't right, and we needed to go to the hospital. And so we went to the hospital, and she was having some issues, but the baby was fine, and they decided to induce the baby. So I guess it was probably almost 30 hours later, we had our son, Liam. And, I mean, you talk about a high going from winning a big race to having my first child, and then also knowing that in 3 days or 4 days, I had to fly out again because the only way you complete the series is obviously if you do all the races. And since I was leading the series, and if I went down to Dallas that next weekend and won, that'd be $60,000 in my pocket, which would buy a lot of diapers and be good for the family. So it'd be a good start. And so begrudgingly, I had to leave again. And I went down to Dallas, and, everybody kept telling me, like, a lot of guys, after they have their first kid, they can win a race, and they find a way. And sure enough, went down to Dallas and won the race and won the series. And, it was just a crazy week with 2 big wins, my biggest payday ever, still to this day. And I had a new son, and, I was on cloud 9 for weeks. It was like the perfect sports and real life interaction. And so I guess those are my 2 favorite racing stories, kind of how I got into the sport and then how I kept going in the sport.
And thanks for sharing those, Cam. And certainly, what better moments than a major win with a great prize purse and then your first son. You mentioned Craig Alexander, Crowie there. Crowie shared when he had the significant win in, I think it would have been the Lifetime Fitness race that he won as well. It was a 1-day race, and he was recently married to Nerida, his wife, and he phoned back. He said to Nerida, "You've got to call your father back home in Australia, no matter what time it is, and tell him we've won the $120,000 I think it was. I can support the family this way." So I guess there was a moment of that for you as well, going, right, this is a valid career pathway.
For sure. And I will never forget, Crowie was super gracious when I won St. Anthony's, and he he's at the time, I don't know, 10 years older than me. He'd been around a long time, won a lot of races. And I very distinctly remember him coming up to me and saying, "Congrats, man. Like, that was awesome. You did a great job. Really enjoy this race because you will only win your first big race one time." And I think it kind of hit home coming from a guy like that had had so much success, to see a young guy sort of hopefully starting down that same path and to take the time to say something it was pretty cool. And it says a lot about him as well.
You're listening to Cam Dye, top-ranked US professional triathlete, share around the highs, the lows, and the learnings of his incredible career to date. Support for today's show comes from the Gold Coast Marathon. Just like the Physical Performance Show, the Gold Coast Marathon encourages runners of all ages and abilities to push their boundaries and strive to complete a personal challenge. The Gold Coast Marathon is held annually on the first weekend in July, and it's a must-do event for any budding athlete, weekend warrior, or family looking for a challenge to complete together. Run for the good times at the Gold Coast Marathon. Visit goldcoastmarathon.com.au to find out more and register today. I recently sat down with race director for the Gold Coast Marathon, Cameron Hart, and we spoke through many things, including the race's coveted history. Here's a little bit of our conversation.
All events start from humble beginnings, and certainly this event did that when it was first put together by the local Rotary Club as a way of getting Gold Coasters fit and healthy. It was really, and they had a relationship with a cardiac specialist, and it was really about getting people running, getting them healthy, and the winners were going to win a trip to Honolulu Marathon. So, look, it started quite humbly, and it's grown over the years. Probably some of the biggest growth elements were in the 1990s when the Japanese wave came. So the Japanese were investing a lot in the Gold Coast in real estate and business, but also Japan Airlines was flying directly, and their support of the Honolulu Marathon is known globally, and they were looking for a second event to support. So back in the 1990s, Japan Airlines was sponsoring this event, and we were getting great numbers of Japanese runners coming down. And that was really, I guess, the first big boom that the event had, and the first big boom of international visitors coming.
Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to cross their physio finish line. That's where we high-five you and celebrate with you that you are finished rehabilitation and you're back to your physical best. Check out our services, including traditional session-to-session appointments, but also our industry-first wellness booster packages, fixed-fee monthly services, and our award-winning 2, 6 and 12-week fixed-fee unlimited access finish line programs. Jump over to pogophysio.com.au to find out more or to book your initial 1-hour appointment. But for now, let's jump back to Cam Dye, top-ranking US professional triathlete, on all things highs, lows and learnings of his great career to date. Cam, this show's about the career highs, lows and the learnings. So, there's some great highs. What's been the darkest, on the lows, what's been the darkest day in your athletic career to date?
Luckily, I haven't had too many. I think the darkest, dark might not be the right word, but one of the hardest races I've ever had was the only race I've ever dropped out of. It was 3 years ago now, probably. So 2015 maybe. And I had a pretty good season. Won a few races, and then toward the tail end of the year, my coach and I decided, okay, we're going to do a couple 70.3s to finish out the year. I'd done Timberman in August and had some success. Was third there. So we thought, okay, at the end of the year in October, we'll do Silverman in Vegas, and then we'll finish up with Miami, 70.3 at the end of the year. And part of the reason I was doing Miami in the first place was because I hadn't been able to get into the original Island House race. So we had decided, okay, well, we'll do Miami 70.3. And people that know me well know that the Olympic distance has always been my baby. That's been my bread and butter. That's been the distance I like the most, the distance that was the most suited for me. And the 70.3 has always been sort of I've had some good races, but I've never really been able to find a passion for it. And so went to Silverman in Vegas, got third there again. So it was a solid result, but, wasn't over the moon about it. It was just kind of a good day at the office, I guess. And then I was excited to go to Miami because I have buddies that live in Miami, and I was going to stay with them, and I was going to stay a couple days after the race and hang out. But I remember going down there, even the week leading up, it was just this weird feeling about not really being that excited to race. And normally I can turn that on. I can, get to race week, and no matter what's going on in my life, I can turn it on. And for whatever reason, it wasn't happening that week. And so I just kind of, went through the week, traveled down there, was hanging out with my buddies, having a good time. And race day came around, woke up. They told us that we might not be able to swim because there's a bunch of jellyfish in the harbor. And I knew something was wrong when they said that. And my first thought was, oh, cool, we don't have to swim. Because that's my thing. If I can't swim, I'm usually the first one to throw my hand up and bitch and moan about it. So I knew something wasn't quite right there. And as it turned out, the next morning, race morning, they said, no, the jellyfish count is low enough, which that doesn't sound very awesome because I didn't really want to be stung by a jellyfish, but they were going to let us swim. So we started the race. I had a decent swim. I let out of the water. And even just running into transition, things just, I don't know, I just couldn't screw my head on. I couldn't get into the race, and I got on the bike, and I tried to follow my plan, hit my watts, eat my nutrition. And if you've ever done Miami 70.3, it's a few turns when you get out of the city, and then it's just a straight out and back for the better part of, 45 miles on an interstate. So you're going straight out on one side. The only turn you make is to cross the median, and then you come back on the other side. So it's just perfectly flat, nothing going on, nothing to see. And I remember getting about halfway out, so 25 miles into the race maybe, and having to do this turnaround and thinking like, I'm not going to make it back. Like my legs are just not going to make it back. And the mental grind to get back to transition was, I guess dark might be the right word. Probably the darkest sporting moment I've ever had. I could not get into the race. I couldn't figure out why I felt so bad. I couldn't figure out what was going on with my legs. And I got to transition, and by that point I was way back in the field, like, I don't know, 25th, 30th maybe. Nowhere near the front anymore. And I got to transition, and I started thinking about, okay, you got to run 13 miles up and over these causeways. It's a 2-lap run. It's super hot because I'm in Miami. And I basically racked my bike, had the slowest transition I've ever had because I was just taking my time, putting my socks on, putting my shoes on. And then I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this race. And it was the most foreign feeling because, like I said, that's never happened, still has never happened since. So I don't know what it was, but I basically then was like, okay, well, you got to do the professional thing. You got to run at least through transition, get by all the photographers, get away from the crowd that's around transition, and then figure it out. And I got outside of transition, ran around a corner, started heading out, and then all of a sudden I was just like, you know what? There's no reason to run. I'm so far out of the money. It's the end of my season, my last race. I want to be anywhere else in the world right now than lacing these shoes up to go run. And I just pulled off the course. I just stepped off on the sidewalk and stopped. And it was funny because at almost the exact same moment, Andres Dreitz, who phenomenal athlete in his own right, was basically 100 meters ahead of me. He turned around, saw me stop, and then he stopped, threw his hands in the air, and walked off the course at the same time. And it was just this super surreal moment. I walked over, went and found my buddies that were there, decided I better call my wife so that she didn't think something had happened to me on the course. So I borrowed a phone, called my wife, and I just broke into tears. I felt so guilty and so bad about dropping out of a race that I emotionally I just lost it. And it was the weirdest. I don't know. Looking back on it now, I should have known something was wrong before the race, that mentally I just wasn't in a place where I wanted to do the race in the first place, and I was tired, and it was the end of the season. And so, I think that's probably the darkest sporting moment I've ever had now that I think about it.
Kim, thanks for being so transparent there. What comes to mind is a recent conversation, Kim, I had with Matt Fitzgerald, author of How Bad Do You Want It, prolific there in the US. And in How Bad Do You Want It, Kim, he shares the story of Jenny Barringer, now Simpson, who, going into the NCAA cross-country champs there in the US, she was the home, the favourite, no one was going to get near her, and she ended up finishing 163rd. And then less than a year later, she went on to win the 1,500 metres at the World Athletics Championship. So 163rd in the NCAA champs that she was expected to win, to then winning the World Athletics champs, 1,500 metres. And the deconstruction of that was that she wasn't prepared to experience pain. She went into it a little bit, not looking forward to experiencing the pain of the performance, a bit blasé. Look, this is the NCAAs. We've got bigger things coming up. And, and Matt summarised it that she wasn't bracing for the worst to then race at her best. So do you think that might have fed into it a little bit? You're a little bit complacent at the time and it's like, this is not really the race I want to push myself in?
Oh, no doubt. No, 100%. I mean, that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was a distance I didn't really want to do at a time when I didn't really want to be racing. And I was just, that's exactly what I wasn't willing to suffer. I wasn't in a mental spot where I was willing to go that deep. And I mean, it's kind of at the level of professional sports, if you're not willing to give everything you absolutely have, it's probably going to go sideways every time. Because everybody else in the race wants it. And that's the thing. I mean, I think for me, it was as much desire as anything else. And I've always prided myself on the ability to, push through things and just keep my head down and do the job. And it was, just the one day where I was supposed to do my job and I couldn't get it done.
So talking about doing your job and your relationship with pain and suffering in events, you're always the guy that wants to push the pace and, as you outlined, play to your strengths, strong swim, strong bike. And let's not lose sight, slouch on the run either, Cam. Obviously the Brownlees, set the scene, if you like, on what run splits off the bike could be like in an Olympic distance race. But, your running is still incredibly strong. So when you take to a start line regularly, as you do, what's going through your head on the start line with regards to pushing yourself?
It's funny. When I actually get to the start line, I'm usually it's like that pure ball of energy and nerves and your hands are wiggling just because you're so jazzed up and ready to go. But I think when I think about it before the race, what I'm going to do, I always just try and look back on what I've already done. Very rarely does a race hurt that much more than the hardest sessions you've done to get ready for that race. And you can certainly push yourself farther and you can do more because it's a race and you've got the competition. But I always think back on all the sessions and all the early mornings and all those hard workouts that I did to get to that point. And then it's kind of like, well, I did all that for this. I know how to suffer. I learned how to suffer during training. So let's just go out and race and have some fun with it and try and actually get the best out of myself now that I'm rested and, knowing that I can go fast. So I always just try and focus on the things I've done to get ready for it. I think the worst feeling in the world is when you get to a start line and you're not prepared, which is why I've made a habit in my career of just not racing until I'm ready. And if that means I push the season back or I skip the first race, then so be it. But I've always been of the mind that if I'm going to line up and toe the line, I want to know that I can give my best and that I have a chance to win the race. And if I don't feel like I can line up and win the race, or I don't feel like I'm ready to do it all, then I don't start. And then I go back to work and try and get things right. Because I think I don't know. I have too much respect for the guys I'm racing against to ever think that I could show up, half cocked and still come away with a good performance. So that's been sort of the key for me, has always been do the work and then go use the race as sort of a celebration of all the work you've put in.
Yeah, fantastic. And this season, Cam, you've had a good injury-free lead up to the kickoff for this season. So what are you looking forwards to on the event horizon for this coming season?
Yeah, no, this has been one of the best off seasons I've ever had as far as health and consistency, and that part of it's been really good. So I was been excited for the start of the year. Had a couple decent races so far, but one of the big races I wanted to focus on this year was Escape from Alcatraz, because it's one of those classic short course races that I've never quite figured out. I've been second, I've been third, and I really want to try and figure out a way to win it this year. So Escape from Alcatraz is in 3 weeks. It's the first weekend in June. And so that'll be the first big race of the year, first day race. And then I had a pretty miserable race and showing in Beijing last year in September. So I'd like to go back and knock that one out of the park again. And in between, I'll do the Escape Series races. Head back up to New York City to do that one. Pretty much just all the short course non-drafting races in the States this year. And I'm actually really excited to go to London for the first time because IMG has thrown the London Triathlon into the Escape Series, which has always been one of those races that I've heard about. It's the biggest race in the world population-wise, and I think there's 10,000 people that do the weekend of racing. So I'm excited to go get over there and check that out. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. There's lots of races to go well at, but Alcatraz is definitely, I think, the top of the list.
Fantastic. And in terms of your experiences, Cam, you've had some success in Island House. You mentioned Island House before, and also your experience in the Super League Triathlon Series on Hamilton Island. So thinking back to Hamilton Island, I recall you really stuck it to, the world's best in the individual time trial up One Palm Hill, I think it's called, there on the island. So what was your Super League experience like, Cam?
Yeah, I mean, Super League was great. That was a super fun weekend. It was a well-done event. It was a cool thing to be a part of. I mean, I haven't done any of the races since, but to be a part of that inaugural race was really cool. I mean, I think I was just talking about being prepared. That was the one time I think I've made an exception where it was kind of, I went to a race that I knew I wasn't quite ready for because of the experience involved with it. I mean, Mac and his team put on a great show. You knew it was going to be a huge race. The guys that were going were all going to be ready. One of the downfalls of being in Boulder, I guess, year-round and not going somewhere for training camp is that if I go try and race somewhere hot in February or March, like that was, it can be a struggle. And I think that came out during the race. But, it was one of those things where I just showed up and I did what I could. I mean, the time trial going in was obviously the thing I was the most focused on because that is my bread and butter. So I really wanted to have a good time trial. I wish the other races had gone a little bit better, but, the one thing that I was supposed to go do well, I did well. So I walked away from the weekend happy about that and just happy to be a part of the experience. I mean, I think they're onto something big if they can keep it rolling and continue to get the caliber of athletes they're getting and do it in these awesome locations, keep the television coverage top notch. I think they're onto something because I think it could be a very cool way to bring triathlon sort of the mass market and attract that casual sports fan that may not usually think of a triathlon. But yeah, it was fun. It was awesome. And I got to meet a bunch of the ITU guys that I never meet, guys I never race against. And that was really cool to meet some of the young guys and, see what the sport is like on the ITU side of things, talk to them, get some stories, but then at the same time get to hang out with some of the old dogs, Brent McMahon and Terenzo. And, I think me and Brent were the two oldest guys at the race and we were rooming with the two youngest guys at the race. So it was fun because, now I'm rooming with Matt Hauser at that race. And since then, he's gone on to lead out the swim at Hamburg World WTS. He was fourth at Com Games this last month or 2 months ago. I mean, he's a huge up-and-comer. I think he's going to be a big part of their team relay that won Com Games, that will be in contention at the next Olympics. But, he was my roommate at Super League. So that was a cool view into the future of the sport. Meet some of the young guys, meet some of the old guys, and yeah, I think it's a fun event that could go a long way.
Any tips that you shared with Matt, Cam? Any advice?
I just tried to tell him that he just needed to keep his head grounded. I mean, when you're that young and you have that much success, I'm sure it can be super hard sometimes to not just think you're the king of the world. But I think every once in a while, guys get their teeth knocked in, and they gotta know how to bounce back. So I was just trying to tell him, how I had been able to sort of stay even keel and be consistent, and that's how you stay injury free. And I mean, he's a good kid. He was more than happy to listen to an old fart, and he thought it was hilarious that I had a 5-year-old at home, and me and my wife were at the time trying to broker the sale of our house while I was at Hamilton Island, and he thought that was just hilarious that we were doing, I think he called the adult things in life, raising kids and buying and selling houses.
You're listening to top-ranking US professional triathlete Cam Dye share around the highs, the lows, and the learnings of his career. If you missed last week's episode, it was an expert edition featuring Dr. Christian Barton, physiotherapist and researcher, and we put the spotlight on all things kneecap or patellofemoral pain. It's a common injury amongst the athletic population. To tune into the full episode and explore the archives of the Physical Performance Show, be sure to jump over to pogophysio.com.au or simply peruse the archives from within your favourite podcast player. Now let's jump back to Cam Dye. Cam, before we throw into a performance round, I just want to just go back on something that you said, which I think would be a great insight into your world and your approach to racing and performance. You said you can normally turn it on in race week, and obviously we shared that example where one particular instance that didn't happen. What do you mean by turn it on?
I don't know. It's sort of I guess it's a hard thing to put into words, but I look at, athletics has always been a passion of mine. I'm a super competitive person. I'm the guy that when you play board games, I hate losing, even to my 5-year-old kid. But when I get to the race, it's just it's different. You're there to race. Everything is about the race. When you're going to bed, when you're eating, what you're doing, I just try and get really focused and sort of basically put the race at the center of the weekend. Some guys like to try and, I guess, distract themselves and sort of forget about the race. And I've always just sort of had my best races when I've been able to embrace it and really just figure out, the things I needed to do, have a plan, and then go execute that plan. Perfect example would be in 2013, my wife and I had just bought a house here in Boulder. And we'd spent 6 months remodeling this house, and we'd been living in my in-laws' basement, and my wife was pregnant, and it was hard, and we finally get into the house, and 7 days after we get into the house, Boulder had a 100-year flood. Just water for days. And we'd slept at our new house for 7 days, and then all of a sudden we had 2 feet of water in the whole bottom floor. So we had to move back into my in-laws' basement and figure out where we're going to do the house. But I had to race that weekend. So I basically didn't train all week, was worried about what was going on in the house. I was ripping out drywall. For a while, I was sandbagging my front door in the middle of Boulder, Colorado, hoping to keep the rain out. And then I flew to Arizona for a Lifetime Series race. And it was like as soon as I got on the plane to go to the race, everything that was at home, and I was going to race. And I got down there, had a day to get ready, did the race, won the race, flew home, and got back to real life. And it was just sort of an example of how when you've been doing it as long as I have, but I think just being able to compartmentalize things, I guess, for lack of a better word, learn how to focus on what the goal is. And if the goal is the race, then that's front and center, and everything else is sort of taking a back seat to it. And the second the race is over, then you're back at your life. But, I guess, pitchers in baseball always talk about tunnel vision, where they can just stand on the mound and the only thing they see is the glove. And I guess sort of in a bigger picture way, when I can go to a race and focus on the race, and that's the center of it all, that's usually when I have my best results.
And that's I guess that's a learned skill, Cam. You don't come into any sporting endeavor with that learned. It's a trained behavior, trained mindset.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's definitely something I've worked on over, since I was 8, since I first started swimming and being competitive and wanting to win races. And, everybody's different. Like I say, there's a lot of guys I know that they'll do everything they can the weekend leading into the race to not think about the race. Like, they don't want to talk about it. They want to go watch movies. They want to go hang out with their friends. They want to do everything to avoid the race until the race. And that works for them. And I think my personality has always just been, I don't know. My parents used to say I need to lighten up. I was too serious about everything. But I guess that was in the athletic world. My ability to get serious has paid off.
Absolutely. Cam, let's do a performance round. So some rapid fire questions. You ready?
Sure.
Training session you most dislike?
Oh, tempo run.
Can you be specific?
Something like a 20 to 30 minute run at 10K pace with a surge down to 5K pace for 30 seconds every kilometer or something. Just something that's super, super uncomfortable because you're already going fast, and then you somehow got to find a way to go faster. And then when you slow down, you don't actually get to go slow. You got to keep going fast. That's always sort of been my kryptonite in running, and figuring out how to do those sessions has paid off in running finally.
Absolutely. And Cam, on running, just pausing the performance round, what are your PBs across 5K and 10K?
Oh, I couldn't even tell you.
Couldn't say, yeah.
I think in a triathlon, I've run 32:20 for 10K, but I've never done them on the track. I've never really done road races. High school cross country, I think I was like 16:45 for 5K. So nothing that anybody would ever care about. It's always been a running off the bike. I think I probably run as fast off the bike as I do in a flat out 10K.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting and wanted to delve there because slouch, Cam. So training session you most love?
Probably bike session, something like 10 by 2 minutes at VO2 max effort with 2 minutes rest. Just something that's super hard and something where you go really hard for a short amount of time and then you get a short amount of recovery. And then you go really hard again and then just sort of one of those learning to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, fantastic. Favorite pre-race meal, Cam? What fuels you on race day?
Pizza. Barbecue chicken or Hawaiian pizza is my go-to the night before a race.
And the morning of?
Morning of is oatmeal.
Good old oatmeal. Bedtime, morning time. What's your obviously 2 young children in the house, but what does Cam Dye try and do around his bedtimes and getting up?
Usually go to bed probably about 10 to 10:30. Like to hang out with my wife at night. Once the kids go to bed, we usually get a couple hours where we can just hang out and relax, watch some TV. I try and read a little bit every night before I go to bed. That usually puts me to sleep. And then the kids' alarms go off at 6:45, and that's when they're allowed to come upstairs and wake us up. So every day starts at 6:45, and this year it was 6:45, and I had to have my son to the bus stop by 7:35. So it was wake up, get him breakfast, put the little one in front of the TV, and then head off to the bus stop.
A smooth operation. Cam, who's the athlete you most admire and why?
Oh,
it's like picking a favorite child.
It is like picking a favorite child. I'd probably have to say Cal Ripken Jr. was somebody I always looked up to when I was little. He's a baseball player, played for the Baltimore Orioles, and he was they called him the Iron Man, not because of anything with triathlon, but he set the record for the most consecutive games played by a baseball player. And I can't think of the actual number right now, but it's like 2,500 straight games played. No injuries, no missing games for any reason ever. And I think it was, obviously he was super lucky to never get injured. But it was also just this sort of workman's attitude. He was going to show up every day. He was going to do the job. He was going to do the work. It sort of, I think my strength as an athlete has been my consistency, just day in and day out, doing the sessions, getting the work done, and over time that's paid dividends. So I think, we'll say Cal Ripken Jr. because he was the Iron Man.
Toughest competitor you've ever raced against, Cam? Who's that and why?
Probably Greg Bennett. He, there's a million guys that are super fast. But Greg was one of those dudes that could just show up to the big races and turn it on. And every year he would do it. And he could swim well, he could ride the house down, and he could run as fast as anybody in the race. So he was always the guy I was trying to get far enough away from on the bike that he wouldn't be able to mow me down. So I would say Greg was probably the toughest dude I ever raced.
Fantastic. Mantra when racing, is there something that you've got regularly on loop going through your head as you race, Cam?
Get it done.
Get it done.
Get it done. It's simple. It's to the point. I can say it over and over again in my head. And it sort of encapsulates, like I was saying earlier, all the work you've done to get ready for the race, what's going on during the race, just stay focused and get it done.
The beauty and simplicity. Your best recovery tip, Cam, what's your best recovery tip for listeners?
Make sure you eat or drink something healthy within 30 minutes of your workout. It's like the most basic, common nutritional advice, but sometimes it's hard to follow, and I think people struggle with it. So just prioritizing, okay, at the end of this session, I'm going to have a recovery drink in my backpack, or I'm going to eat this bar, or I'm going straight home and I'm going to eat right away. Because I think especially if you have kids and if you have a job, and once you get busy, it's so easy to finish the workout and then get in the car, and then you get on the phone talking to somebody, and then you get somewhere, and all of a sudden it's like 2 hours later, you're starving and you're angry, and you just gotta start the recovery right by when the workout ends. Get something to eat or drink right away. Get some calories.
Brilliant advice. What's the worst injury you've ever had to work through, Cam?
Plantar fasciitis. It was bad. It was one of those things where, unfortunately, I for whatever reason didn't get the right advice at the right time, and I just sort of kept wearing more stable shoes over and over again. They would sort of fix the problem for a little while and then come back. So I'd get to a more stable shoe, and that fixed the problem, and then go back. And finally, I just needed to get out of my shoes altogether and go run on the grass barefoot and strengthen my feet. And since I figured it all out, it hasn't been a problem. But it lagged on for probably 18 months and was just miserable. Yeah. Every step, the time you wake up, the time you go to bed hurts.
But it's such a nuisance. One word to describe your racing style.
Aggressive.
How would you describe being in the zone?
I guess I've never thought about describing being in the zone. I would describe being in the zone as a very calm, chaotic place. You're just you're going along, but everything's going at hyperspeed, and it seems like it's going at regular speed. So it's calming, but at the same time, it speeds things up.
Yeah, it's a nice description. Calm chaos. When was the last time Cam Dye was in the zone?
Probably last Wednesday. I was doing a session of hill repeats, and I just kind of got going, and things were going well, and each rep just kept taking them over, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing.
Brilliant. Last question in the performance round, Cam. What's the hardest session Cam Dye has ever done?
I can't remember the exact session, but the gist of it was a double brick session. So it was supposed to be, I believe, a 2-hour ride where the first hour was just mellow, and then it was like 30 minutes of tempo, and then it finished with there was a break in there, and then it finished with 20 minutes of like race pace, LT pace. Straight off that into a run that was an hour, and I think it was supposed to be a pretty steady run. And then back on the bike, and the second ride I think was an hour, and it was maybe 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off at race pace. Straight back onto a run that was 30 minutes, and it started with 5 minutes at 10K pace, and then 5 minutes easy, 5 minutes 10K pace, back and forth for 30. And I didn't even come close. Like I got most of the way through the second ride on schedule, and then the wheels sort of fell off. And by the time I started the second run, I wasn't even close. It was one of those sessions where I ended it early. I was absolutely crushed nutritionally, mentally, didn't go well. So it was made for a very, very long, miserable session.
Cam, we've done the highs, the lows, and the learnings now. What's one bit of training advice that you would give to listeners of the show on how to perform at their best? If it could just be one solitary piece of advice.
Be as consistent as you can possibly be. Lots of people come up with a plan and then they stick to part of it, or, something happens, so they miss the workout they wanted to do, so they don't do anything. And I think in general, just being consistent and doing the best you can to get in the sessions day in and day out, no excuses, figure out a way to do it. Even if that means shortening the session, or, switching days, or, life is hard. Life gets in the way. especially the more pieces you have to it when it comes to kids and jobs and spouses. But I think just being consistent pays the most dividends. There's no magic bullet. There's no one workout that's going to make your race go well. But being consistent pays the most dividends because it keeps you the least injured and gives you the best chance of having a good race.
Brilliant. Cam, personality behind the athlete. Fun question. 3 people at a dinner table. Who's at your dinner table? They can be living or past, and why?
Oh, let's see. The Rock, the actor, because I think he truly is probably the most interesting man in the world. Let's see. Who else? Tony Robbins, because I feel like I could probably learn a lot, but he's also got a million stories, and he's like the most motivational dude in the world. So if you sat at a table with him and didn't walk away from that just jazzed on life, then you probably weren't listening. And the third would be, oh man, that's a good question.
You got The Rock, you've got Tony, Cam Dye.
Yeah. The Rock, Tony Robbins, me, and I need a woman. Got to throw in some feminine wisdom. My grandma.
Beautiful.
Because she knew a lot about everything.
Wow.
And I think she would get a kick out of hanging out with The Rock.
Well, that's an awesome table. Where are you going to take these guests? Where's dinner going to be?
Maybe a hibachi grill. Something fun to watch.
Fantastic. Cam, you've got some great supporters that have been with you for some time. Anyone you want to give a shout out to there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my original sponsor was my parents. So my dad cut me my first ever sponsor check when I was racing professionally for the first time. So definitely a shout out to my parents, my wife, because she puts up with this crazy sport, and then more closely related to triathlon, the guys at Ventum Racing, fastest bike out there. Great dudes, and give a shout out to First Endurance. When it comes to nutrition, nobody beats them, and they've been very long time supporters of myself, and they've gotten me through a lot of very tough sessions. So yeah, give a shout out to those guys.
Fantastic. Cam, finally, all guests of the Physical Performance Show get to issue listeners with a physical challenge for the week, something that they can take on and try. What's Cam Dye's physical challenge for the week going to be?
So we'll say it's physical challenge for the week, but it may be a little longer than that, depending on what your schedule is, where you are in your season and whatnot. But I want you to think of a workout that you've done in the past that did not go well, and I want you to schedule it sometime in the near future, say within the next month. If you got to tone down the intervals or whatever to make it more manageable, do that. But find something that beats you once and try and do it again and see if you can beat it this time.
That, Cam, is a fantastic physical challenge. Absolutely awesome. And so if you do take that challenge on, then do let myself and Cam know. Cam, where can we find you online?
Best place to find me is probably Twitter and Instagram. It's just at CamDyeTry, CamDyetri. Website's CameronDye.com, but it's basically just a blog. So, yeah, social media, Instagram, Twitter. Love to hear from you. Got a page on Facebook that's also Cam Dye Try. So, yeah, hit me with questions, comments, whatever you got.
Cam, fantastic, mate. Lots of fun. Thank you for hanging out with us today, and certainly wish you all the best on behalf of all the listeners for the season ahead and chasing the Escape from Alcatraz title.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brad. It's been fun.
So, there you have it. I trust you enjoyed this episode of the Physical Performance Show featuring Cam Dye. If you did, then please let both Cam and myself know. You'll find our social media handles over at pogophysio.com.au along with a copy of the show notes. If today was your first time tuning in to the Physical Performance Show, then a mighty, mighty welcome. If it was your 113th time, then welcome back and thank you for your ongoing support. If you've enjoyed today's episode and you know of someone who would be interested or who would take a lot out of it, then please take a moment to share the episode with them. Sharing means the world, and it would certainly help the Physical Performance Show reach the earbuds of more people who, just like yourself, are looking to pursue and perform at their physical best. Don't forget to hit subscribe from within your favourite podcast player to automatically have each and every episode of the Physical Performance Show live in your device as it goes live each and every week on Thursday evenings at 9 p.m. If you've been enjoying the Physical Performance Show, then please consider leaving a rating or a review, or even better, both. Simple, you can do it over at iTunes. A big thank you to David Preceda, who is a long-term listener of the Physical Performance Show, and David left this fantastic review. The best company to have on my long runs. David rated the program 5 stars. Love the show. I've been a listener from the start. Great insight into the mental and physical aspects of peak performance. I particularly love hearing the athletes' most and least loved sessions. Keep up the great work, in brackets, because I need the distraction on my long runs. David. And at the time of recording, David, or Macca as he's affectionately known, is only a few weeks away from hunting down what will hopefully be a sub 3 hour marathon at the Gold Coast Marathon. David's also a triathlon coach with the wonderful Gold Coast-based T-Rex Triathlon Training Club here on the mighty Gold Coast. So big thanks, David. As always, a big thanks to the great team who make the Physical Performance Show possible. That's Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Olding on all things graphic design, and Daryl Misson, our esteemed and much-loved audio engineer. Of course, another big thank you to this week's sponsor, the Gold Coast Marathon. Podcasts are certainly free to download, however, they are not free to produce. So thank you once again, the Gold Coast Marathon, for your support. And if you are yet to register for the Gold Coast Marathon, then jump over to goldcoastmarathon.com.au. Do not miss the good times at this wonderful event held here on the beautiful and sunny Gold Coast. You can choose from a race from 5.7 kilometres, 10 kilometres on the road, half marathon, or the coveted full-length marathon distance. Jump over to goldcoastmarathon.com.au. We are interested to hear from you around what you think we can do better or improve with the Physical Performance Show. So we've opened up a podcast quiz. It's available over at pogophysio.com.au/podcast. And it's running for a couple more episodes up until the end of episode 115. Now, if you take the time to leave some feedback over there, answer a few questions, you are in the draw to win a $100 movie voucher to the cinemas of your choice. So a big thanks to those that have already given some feedback. It's been well received and will be acted on. So if you'd like to have your say, please jump over to the podcast quiz. And this week's Podsy winner of the week, who wins a signed copy of my Amazon bestseller, You Can Run Pain Free, 0 to 21. That's the Instagram handle. And 0 to 21 was recently listening to last week's guest expert edition, Dr. Christian Barton, on all things kneecap or patellofemoral pain. And 0 to 21 commented in her caption, I feel so much better and more informed going forward with my dodgy knees, learning the tools to run forever. Thank you very much for taking the time to leave a Podsy. And if you'd like to win a copy of You Can Run Pain Free, take your Podsy and load it up on a social, tag me in at Brad_beer or at Pogo Physio, and you're in the draw to win the book. Coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, episode 114, I caught up with Nicole Bunyan. Nicole is the mastermind behind the incredibly popular Running Mums Australia. She's a founder of it. She's also an ultra runner and coach. She's got a wonderful story, and her sharings will inspire you. So be sure to tune in next week for the Physical Performance Show. Beyond Nicole, we bring you some other great conversations with Ken Wallace, Olympic champion sprint kayaker, Kristin Blumenfeld, top-ranking Norwegian Olympic triathlete, and also famed Australian distance running coach, Dick Telford. So stay tuned to the Physical Performance Show. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.